Hi everyone, happy Canada Agriculture Day from Aaron Holtz Farms. This year, to celebrate Canada's Agriculture Day, I wanted to make a YouTube playlist of some videos. This playlist is called Livestock Gone Wild, and basically we're going to be talking about the wild side of livestock. And we're going to start with the Aurochs, which is the ancestor of today's domestic cattle. So let's dive in. Most of us have seen domesticated cattle around, whether on TV or when we go for a drive in the country. These are some pictures of some of the cows on my farm. These are from the Bos Taurus species. There's Bos Taurus and Bos Indicus. Those are the two species of domesticated cattle in the world. Bos Taurus look like these, and Bos Indicus are the zebu type cattle that you see in warmer climates. And all of these descended from one type of cattle called the Aurochs, which is what we're going to talk about today. And all the cattle today in the world are bred for a variety of purposes, most of them being for meat or milk, and the actual ancestor of all of these, the Aurochs, has gone extinct. As you can see, there are some differences between the Aurochs and modern-day cattle. Some of these differences include coloring. Some more ancient breeds do still have this type of coloring, but many do not. So the bulls are black and have a white or gray eel stripe running down the back, and the cows are sort of this reddish color. The calves start out this red or chestnut color, and then the bull calves darken to black. And rather than trying to describe the rest of them in my own words, I'd like to read to you from page 8 of a paper from Rewilding Europe entitled Aurochs Genetics, a Cornerstone of European Biodiversity. The authors of this paper describe the Aurochs in this way. Archaeology, archaeozoology, written historical sources, cave paintings, knowledge about cattle genetics, cattle breeding, and cattle behavior have all contributed to our understanding of the Aurochs in the last decades. We know what the animal looked like, we know its ecology. The size of the Aurochs bulls varied between 155 centimeters and 180 centimeters, depending on the local circumstances. The size of cows was between 135 centimeters and 155 centimeters. Bulls were significantly larger than cows. The body shape of an Aurochs was different from many developed cattle breeds today. It had an athletic body shape and long legs built for long-distance walking. It was a swift and very agile animal. The skull carrying the large horns was elongated and big compared to the rest of the body. Bulls' horns could reach up to 107 centimeters in length and between 10 and 18 centimeters in diameter at their base. The cows had horns probably reaching up to 70 centimeters in length. The bull's horns were larger, with the curvature being more strongly pronounced in cows. Both sexes had a distinct, light-colored, often white muzzle and a distinct eel stripe, especially with bulls. Although it is now extinct, the Aurochs once roamed vast areas of Europe, Asia, and even northern Africa. It is well documented in ancient sources and art, such as cave paintings, seals, reliefs, and illustrations from the Middle Ages. Julius Caesar commented on the Aurochs in his Gallic Wars and said, quote, "A little below the elephant in size, and of the appearance, color, and shape of a bull, Their strength and speed are extraordinary. They spare neither man nor wild beast which they have espied. Not even when taken very young can they be rendered familiar to men and tamed. The size, shape, and appearance of their horns differ much from the horns of our oxen. These they anxiously seek after, and bind at the tips with silver, and use as cups at their most sumptuous entertainments." The aurochs, or wild ox, has been mentioned in a number of other ancient texts, including the book of Job in the Old Testament. The aurochs were slowly hunted to extinction, with the last of their species dying in the Middle Ages. The last cow died in a forest in Poland in 1627, with the last bull dying a few years prior to that. Now, since the aurochs is extinct, it's easy to think, that's it, it's gone, it's over. And that is the case with most species that go extinct. However, because we have descendants in domestic cattle, there are attempts now to bring back the aurochs, so to speak. Now, of course, we can never get that species back again, but there are attempts to do some backbreeding, particularly through the more primitive breeds of domesticated cattle, and in that way get something that very closely resembles the aurochs, that is wild, not domesticated anymore, and that can fill the ecological role of the aurochs in European wilderness areas, which we'll talk about in a moment. Now, backbreeding attempts have been going on for a little while. The more infamous one would be that of Heinz and Lutz Heck in the 1930s and 40s in Germany. They created the Heck cattle, which are actually not very much like the aurochs. They're smaller and stockier. They're quite aggressive, and they do have an unfortunate association with the Nazi Party. So that's perhaps what you might call a failed attempt. More recent attempts are, of course, a little bit closer, partly just because of the advances in technology that allow us to understand the genetics of the aurochs a little bit better. And so there are several programs across Europe that are trying to bring back the aurochs, particularly in the Netherlands and Germany and a few other countries. And there are even cattle, they're called Taurus cattle, that have been released in a few wild areas in Europe. So that's very exciting. Now, the fact that domestic cattle can be backbred to create something very close to the aurochs is pretty cool, but just because it can be done doesn't mean it should be done. And so here we have to evaluate the reasons why the aurochs is such a big deal. Now, here in North America, we have the bison, and in fact there are European bison that they are also trying to bring back. Those didn't go completely extinct, but that's another video. But because we have the bison, we understand that our land was shaped very much by these large grazing beasts that would travel in herds, and they kept the prairies open, and they were a keystone species in the grassland ecosystems. Well, the same is true in Europe, where they had aurochs and bison, or also called wisent, and they would travel through Europe and Asia and North Africa, and they would keep open large parts of the wilderness there, If it weren't for them, the wilderness would close in with forest, and it would be a very different ecosystem. So they're bringing biological diversity and allowing for many species to live there that might not actually be able to survive in a forested environment. And so this is why they're a big deal. But they haven't had aurochs for about 400 years now in Europe. And so that brings up the question, why now? Why are they, how were these areas managed in the 400 years in between? Well, there were farmers and they had cattle and they would graze their cattle, as you do as a farmer. And so these cattle would sort of manage the land, with the farmers, and they would keep these areas open. But there's this phenomenon going on now where a lot of farmland is being abandoned for a variety of reasons, and so it's just being left for nature to take over, but they don't have these keystone species to help manage these ecosystems now, and so it's a bit of an unhealthy situation, and that's why there's this push now to bring aurochs and European bison back into the wild areas of Europe. And so that's the aurochs, and I just thought it was really cool. I really hope you've enjoyed learning a little bit about this.